The phone rang while I was rinsing soap from a row of little milk cartons. The kind second graders crush when they think no one's looking. It was after 6, the school hallways emptied of footsteps, and the custodian's closet smelled like lemon cleaner and tired ambition. I balanced my cell between shoulder and cheek, one hand still inside the sink, water warm and gray. "Ma," he said, and I knew from the first syllable, before the breath, before the second word, that my son was speaking from a room with expensive lighting. "Marcus," I answered and turned the faucet off, the quiet so sudden it felt like a held breath. "You calling because you miss me or because you need the recipe for the good cornbread?" He laughed, the quick polite kind I've heard him use in boardrooms and at funerals. Not the laugh I knew from the years he slept in a race car bed and believed pancakes could fix anything. "I miss you," he said, and something in him tried to mean it. "Listen, Vanessa and we're having a few people over Saturday night. Sort of an engagement dinner. Nothing big." Nothing big. I looked down at my hands, at the small constellation of bleach freckles earned from 30 years of making other people's messes disappear. "That sounds nice," I said, rolling the towel slow between my fingers. "You want me to make the peach cobbler?" There was the smallest pause, a seam in the sentence. No. We're having it catered," he said, the way people say they're planning to cheat on a diet but still expect applause for ordering water. "You should just come. Relax. Be with us." "Be with us," he said, as if it were a door that swung both ways. "I can do that," I said. "What time you want me?" 6. Maybe 6:30, he said. I could hear movement in the background. A clink of glass, a softened voice, not his, saying something about seating cards. "Vanessa," I guessed, with her vowels ironed crisp. "Dress well, you know. It's formalish but not black tie. Simple. Elegant." Simple. Elegant. Words that never needed to be explained to me until my life fell outside their definition. "I got a Sunday dress," I said, "the blue one with the pearl buttons I keep for funerals and choir anniversaries. Still fits if I don't exhale." He chuckled again, paper thin. "Great. We'll text you the address." "You moved again?" I asked, trying to keep the question from wearing accusation like perfume. "Just across town," he said too quickly. "Bigger place. Closer to the firm. Closer to another world." I murmured, not mean just accurate. "What's that, Ma?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm happy for you." Silence stretched between us like a tight sheet. I could hear him folding himself into the shape of a good son, the way he used to fold programs at church until the corners were perfect. "It'll mean a lot if you're there," he said softer. "Vanessa's folks will be in from Buckhead. Some partners, a few clients. Just be there." "Okay." He didn't say don't be late, or try not to talk too much about the school, or Angela doesn't need to come, but all three slipped into my ear anyway. "I'll be there," I said. "You need anything else?" Another voice, Vanessa's, crisp as celery, floated closer, asking whether the gold chargers or the glass ones felt more elevated. I could almost see Marcus's face turn toward her, the way a sunflower follows whatever promises light. "That's it," he said. "Love you, Ma." "Love you," I said and waited. Sometimes he says it back like a question. This time he said it the way people say amen, when the prayer's almost finished. When the call ended, the room got its sound back. The hum of the old fridge, the soft complaint of the fluorescent light, the water making its way down pipes that remember more curses than hymns. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked at my reflection in the metal of the paper towel dispenser. The woman looking back had good eyes and a tired mouth and a head scarf tied just how my mama taught me. She knew how to scrub out gum from under desks and how to remove the shadow ring coffee cups leave on laminate. She also knew when a voice meant welcome and when it meant try not to touch anything. I finished the last of my rounds. One more trash bin, one more light clicked off, one more classroom set in order like a prayer folded neat. On my way out, I stopped in the second grade hallway and looked up at the crayon drawings taped crooked to the wall. In one, a house with a roof too big for its body leaned toward a sun that took up half the sky. In another, a stick family stood holding hands on grass as green as envy. The smallest stick wore a crown. Sometimes we draw the world the way we need it to be so we can stand the version we get. Outside, the evening had the color of oversteeped tea. I breathed in the soft wet of Atlanta summer and walked the 2 blocks home. Past hedges that remembered better gardeners. Past a yard sign from an election nobody mentioned anymore. Past Angela's porch where a wind chime told the same joke it tells every night. Angela opened her door before I got to mine like she'd been standing with a hand on the knob, waiting for the sound of my feet. "You got that look?" she said. "The one that means somebody just asked you to act smaller than you are." I sighed and smiled in the same breath. Marcus called. "He alive?" Her eyebrows asked the rest. "Alive, engaged and hosting dinner Saturday," I said, letting my bag slip from my shoulder to my forearm, the strap a familiar bruise. "He says dress elegant. He says it'd mean a lot." Angela snorted the way only women who've earned it can. "Elegant is not a dress, it's a posture. He know that." "He knows what his people know," I said. "And his people don't mop after pep rallies." "His people barely mop their own faces," she said, waving me in with a flick of her wrist. "Come on, I got tea and that pound cake from Sister Hattie that tastes like an apology." I followed her into the soft lamplight. Angela's living room always smells like something that came out of the oven, and a little like peppermint oil. The kind she dabs on her knees when rain is flirting with the forecast. We sat, cups in hand, the kind of quiet settling that only happens with someone who remembers your first house and your worst haircut. "You going?" she said. "Not a question." I told him I would. "You want to?" "I want to see my child," I said. "I don't want to audition for the part of his mother." Angela hummed, a sound like a bass line. "Then don't. Show up as the only version of you that's survived everything." "I hear you," I said, and I did. Still, an old ache pressed a thumb into the center of my chest. I could feel the mirror of my closet waiting for me at home. The way it waits for all women who've been told a room will measure them before it greets them. We talked another 10 minutes about nothing that was actually everything. Church gossip that wasn't gossip because Mercy told it, the principal's new habit of pretending budget cuts were an act of God, the condition of my hydrangeas who refused to obey instructions. Before I left, Angela took my hand in both of hers and gave it a squeeze like a benediction. "If they can't love you in your school shoes," she said, "they don't get to love you in heels." On my own porch, I paused and looked across at hers, the porch light a small halo cupping the dark. Some days I think the only reason I've made it this far is because my house can see her house. Inside, the air held the day's heat like a grudge. I opened a window and let the night reach in. On the hallway wall, the pictures I'd meant to dust last Sunday leaned toward one another like old friends swapping news. Marcus at 5, gap-toothed and shining. Marcus at 18 in a tie he hated. Marcus last Christmas, standing in my kitchen with his hands in his pockets, already halfway out the door. And Henry, always Henry, caught in that laugh that made other men forgive him for beating them at dominoes. I stood there a long moment, and let the better years touch my face. Then I went to the bedroom and pulled the blue dress from the back of the closet. I laid it on the bed like a question. The pearl buttons looked moon-pale in the lamplight. I pressed my palm over my belly the way I used to when Marcus kicked and counted backward from 10. "Simple," I said into the quiet, testing the word like a new shoe. "Elegant." In the mirror, I saw the truth I never say out loud. I know how to disappear when a room wants me to. I learned it pushing a mop at midnight, learned it sitting in PDA meetings where the mothers practice being polite to the woman who fed their children, learned it in grief when the casseroles stop but the bills don't. It is a skill, and it is a sin against yourself, and sometimes it is both at once. I folded the dress back over the hanger and whispered, "Lord, if I must be small, let it be because I chose humility, not because someone mistook me for furniture." The phone buzzed on the dresser. A new message from Marcus. "Sent you the address. Dress code cocktail. Proud of you, Ma." The period after cocktail felt like a fence post. The words after it felt like a memory of something I couldn't set down. I typed "see you at 6. Then, against my better judgment, backspaced and added a heart. I don't traffic in emojis, but sometimes a mother's love needs a shape. Before bed, I put on a record, the old Mahalia where her voice climbs the ladder and refuses to look down, and sat on the edge of the mattress tying and untying my scarf like it mattered. The music filled the small places and eased the grip in my chest until breathing felt like something I might do on purpose. Sleep came late, and when it did, it brought the kind of dreams that tell the truth wearing costumes. I was in a house with too many corners. People moved through it carrying plates that never emptied. A woman with perfect nails kept asking me to hold her purse while she took credit for the food. I woke to the sound of my own name in my mouth. Morning made an effort. I made coffee. The school day unrolled itself. Sticky fingers lost library books, a science experiment that went to war with gravity. The hours did their job and kept me from thinking too much. But that night, when the house quieted and the clock drew a neat circle out of seconds, the call came back and stood in the doorway of my thoughts, uninvited and persistent. I could hear the part of his voice that sounded like love, and the part that sounded like a man translating himself for an audience. I could hear the words he didn't say, the instructions wrapped in kindness. I took my pocket Bible from the nightstand, the one with a crack down the leather where years had taught it to open to comfort. My eye fell on a verse that has walked me home more times than I can count. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I am too old to pretend I have enemies, and too honest not to admit that some rooms behave like they invented me just so they could forget me. Still, a table is a table. I know how to sit at one without asking permission. I closed the book, set it back down, and said to the empty room, "I'll go. I'll bring my good posture and my better manners. I'll let them be who they think they are, and I will be who I have always been." The night didn't answer, but it didn't argue. Sometimes that's enough. On Friday, Angela came over with a garment bag, and a look that meant she'd already decided what I was wearing. "Try it," she said, hanging it on my closet door like a flag. Borrowed from my cousin who thinks retirement means shopping like it's cardio. I pinched the fabric between finger and thumb. Soft. Black with a sensible neckline and sleeves that forgave upper arms for being alive. I was going to wear my blue. "You still can," she said. "To church, where we already know you're special." I tried it on. It fit like a yes. Angela fussed with the shoulders, then stepped back, chin lifted, eyes bright. "See? Elegant is a posture." I looked in the mirror, and did not disappear. Saturday came the way big days do, slow at first, then all at once. I ironed the dress even though it didn't need it, polished the low heels I only wear when the floor is steady, and put on the pearl studs Henry bought me with overtime pay the year Marcus started kindergarten. The house held its breath while I did. When I was ready, I stood in the doorway and let myself feel both things at once. The pride that raises a son high enough to see over fences, and the fear that he will forget to look back. At 5:30 Marcus texted, "Traffic's light, see you soon. Address sent again just in case." I typed on my way. And then, because truth is an old friend that nags, I added proud of you too. I took one last look at the life I've made out of ordinary days. The dishes draining like small moons, the plant that refuses to mind me, the photo on the fridge where Henry is holding Marcus like a joke they're both in on, and I locked the door. On the porch, Angela waited with her keys already in her hand. "I'll follow you," she said. "Not inside. Just far enough to be the first person you see when it's done." I wanted to cry and didn't. Instead, I touched her wrist the way women do when words can't carry the weight. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to." At the curb, I slid into my old sedan, the seat molded to a shape that knows the truth about my back. The engine turned over without complaint. In the rear view, I caught my own eyes, steady and a little amused, like a woman who's survived enough to qualify for softness. I pulled out slow, Angela behind me, two porch lights shrinking in the side mirror, until they were small, stubborn stars. The sun was easing itself down, the street humming with people who had better things to do than worry about a dress code. Halfway to whatever waited, the radio found a Marvin Gaye song and I let it. His voice dulled the edge on the part of me that wanted to turn around. The highway widened, buildings grew taller and sleeker, and the city put on its evening jewelry. Somewhere between my neighborhood and his, between who I have always been and who he is trying to be, the call replayed one last time, word for word. I heard the worry in his carefulness. I heard the request hiding inside the invitation. I heard my own "I'll be there," and decided to mean it with my whole self. I drove toward the house on the hill, toward the table, toward the people who speak refinement like a native language. The sky ahead held a hard, clean light. It did not promise kindness. It did not promise fairness. It promised illumination. And I thought, I have nothing to hide that the light can shame. Let it come. Morning light spilled into my bedroom like a visitor I hadn't tidied for. The sun found the dust on the dresser, the wrinkles in the curtains, the framed photo of Marcus in his cap and gown. Grinning like the world had already promised him something better than it gave me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still open to his message from last night. Dress code cocktail. I'd read those words so many times they had started to sound like a judgment. Cocktail. The word tasted foreign, like a dish you're too polite to admit you can't swallow. I stood, opened my closet, and stared at the narrow space where my life hung in lines of faded color. Blue, gray, brown. 2 pairs of shoes below, one for Sundays, one for everything else. I ran my fingers over the dresses, each one whispering a memory. The blue with pearl buttons, worn to Henry's funeral. The mustard one, to church the day Marcus got his scholarship. The green one with the hem I'd mended twice, my interview for the cafeteria supervisor job I never got back. I held them up one by one, watching my reflection in the long mirror beside the bed. The woman in the glass looked kind, yes, but tired. Her clothes were ironed but tired too, like they'd carried her dignity for too many miles. Cocktail. I muttered again, like if I said it enough it might turn into something I already owned. The mirror had seen me through every version of myself. Mother, widow, worker, survivor. But that morning, it became a measuring stick. The kind of mirror that didn't just show you what was there. It showed you everything you weren't supposed to be. I tried the blue dress first. The fabric still smelled faintly of lavender soap and old grief. I buttoned it slowly, each pearl catching the morning light. It was pretty once. Respectable. But the mirror didn't care about respectable. It cared about modern. About polished. About appropriate. I turned side to side. My reflection sighed with me. Lord, I whispered. You know I love this boy. But I don't think I own the kind of love that comes with sequins. I pulled out another. A black skirt and white blouse combo I'd worn to the school Christmas party. Simple, clean. The kind of outfit that says dependable without saying forgettable. But as I looked closer, I saw the faint bleach stain near the cuff, the one I'd tried to hide under bracelets. My shoulders sank. For years, I'd believed that doing everything right would be enough, that hard work, good manners, and a steady faith could lift a person as high as any title. But now, staring at my reflection, I realized the truth. Some people didn't care how you climbed if you still smelled like the climb itself. By 10 a.m., my bed was covered with every outfit I owned. Church dresses, uniforms, 2 old scarves that used to feel fancy when tied just right. None of them looked like they belonged in the kind of house Marcus lived in now. The kind with marble countertops and women who wore perfume with names like Evening Grace. I sat down in the middle of the mess, my knees aching, my pride even more so. My hands found the edges of a photo tucked between 2 folded blouses. Marcus at 12. Holding a basketball too big for him, beaming at me like I was the only cheerleader that mattered. You said you'd never forget. I whispered to the photo. I guess I just didn't know forgetting could wear a suit. The day grew hotter, and the sunlight turned unforgiving. It painted every wrinkle in the fabric, every faded thread. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything in my closet had lived too many lives to be allowed in his. Still, I tried again. This time, I found an old cream dress wrapped in plastic at the very back. I hadn't touched it since Marcus's college graduation. Angela had made me buy it then. Something that looks like hope, she'd said. It was simple, sleeveless, with a delicate lace trim. When I held it up now, the lace had yellowed, but it still felt like hope. I slipped it on carefully, smoothing it down over my hips. The zipper fought me halfway, but I won. In the mirror, I stood straighter. My hair was grayer now, my waist softer. But for a moment, I saw her, the woman who'd cheered from the bleachers in that same dress, tears in her eyes as her son walked across the stage. I turned to the side and smiled, then frowned, then smiled again. Almost, I said to my reflection. Almost. I pulled my chair closer to the vanity, if you could call an old desk with a cracked mirror a vanity, and opened my little makeup pouch. Inside were 2 lipsticks, one coral, one brown, both gifts from Angela on birthdays she refused to forget. The coral felt too young, the brown too safe. I tried both and looked like two different women, neither of whom felt quite right. Maybe I'll just go as myself, I said aloud. The woman in the mirror didn't laugh. She knew that myself wasn't what this invitation required. That's when the shame crept in, slow, invisible, with soft hands that knew exactly where to press. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about what they represented. How many times had I told Marcus that success wasn't measured by the shine of your shoes, but by the shine of your soul? How many times had I believed it? Now here I was, trying to polish the part of me I thought I'd outgrown. Around noon, I heard the soft knock I was expecting. Angela never waits for permission. She just gives you time to admit you need her. Don't you tell me you've been crying over fabric, she said as soon as she stepped in. I'm not crying, I lied. I'm reassessing my wardrobe. She gave the closet one look and crossed her arms. Baby, your wardrobe don't need reassessment. It needs retirement. I laughed through my nose, shaking my head. Marcus said it's formal. Cocktail. Angela's eyebrows jumped. Cocktail? Well, unless they serving those in plastic cups, we got some work to do. She walked to the closet, flipping hangers with the authority of a woman who's dressed half the church choir. This blue one's lovely but too sad. This green one's saying hire me. Not I'm proud of you, son. She paused at the cream lace. Now this one still got fight in it. It's a little tight, I said. So are most blessings, she said. Try it. When I came out of the bathroom, the dress fit almost perfectly, like it had waited for this moment just to prove a point. Angela's eyes softened. Now there she is. Who? I asked, smoothing the skirt nervously. The woman who raised a man worth all this worrying. Her words hit deeper than she probably meant them to. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't dressing for Marcus. I was dressing for every version of myself that had ever stood in the shadows of his success and whispered, "You did good." I looked in the mirror again. The shame hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. It wasn't about being poor or old or out of place anymore. It was about wanting to belong to a world I'd built, but wasn't invited into. Angela came behind me, placing her hands on my shoulders. Listen, she said, meeting my eyes in the reflection. You're not going there to prove something. You're going to remind him of something. And what's that? I asked. That everything he thinks makes him special started right here, she said, tapping my heart. I smiled, small but real. Then I'll need to stand tall enough for him to remember. That evening, after Angela left, I stood in front of the mirror one last time. The dress hung neatly now, pressed and ready. I'd pinned my hair up the way Henry used to like. Let the world see that face, he'd say, and set my shoes by the door. The reflection staring back wasn't glamorous. But she looked composed. Whole. A little nervous, yes, but there was something unshakable behind her eyes. Cocktail. I whispered once more, smiling. Then I'll be the glass they can't refill. And for the first time since the phone call, the mirror didn't feel like judgment. It felt like witness. By Friday afternoon, I had turned my bedroom into a battlefield of fabric. The cream dress hung from the closet door, the blue one lay surrendered across the bed, and my shoes waited near the window like soldiers unsure of their orders. The mirror kept watching, saying nothing, which in my experience, is what truth does when it knows you're not ready to hear it. The clock on the nightstand ticked like a reminder that time never waits for doubt. I'd done everything I could. Washed, pressed, polished. And yet, no matter how many times I changed, I still looked like the same woman who scraped gum from under desks and picked pennies out of dryers. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps followed by one long one. The rhythm of a woman who's never had to wait on anyone's permission. Angela. I opened the door, and there she was, leaning on the frame, wearing her favorite yellow dress and that look that could melt iron. Lord, you look like you've been through a sale at Macy's and lost the fight, she said. I've been trying on possibilities, I answered, waving toward the mountain of fabric behind me. None of them made me rich or respectable. Angela stepped inside like she owned the air. You don't need respectability, you need reminder. Let me see what you're working with. She went straight to the closet, hands moving fast, clucking her tongue at every hanger. This one's tired. This one's sad. This one's a cry for help. Evelyn, I love you, but your wardrobe's telling stories I didn't approve. I sat on the bed, half laughing, half defeated. Marcus said it's formal. I don't even know what that means anymore. She turned to me, one hand on her hip. Formal means they want to see how much you can make yourself look like them. Don't do that. You've been yourself too long to start performing. I wanted to believe her, but the image of Marcus's polished fiancée, Vanessa, hovered in my mind. Perfect posture, perfect words, perfect hair that looked like it had never met humidity. How could I walk into that world without feeling like an afterthought? Angela pulled a hanger out triumphantly, a soft burgundy dress I'd forgotten I owned. Now this one right here, this got story. This says, I may not own a mansion, but I can still walk like I built one. I squinted at it. It's too bold. It's honest, she said. Try it before you argue. I did. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Angela's expression softened from sass to something like awe. Well, look at God, she whispered, crossing her arms. He never makes duplicates, does he? The fabric hugged my shoulders and flowed just enough to make me feel seen but not loud. It wasn't new, but it had survived time, like me. Angela circled me like an artist checking her painting. That color's preaching a sermon, she said. It says, I know who I am, and I didn't need permission to arrive. I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back didn't look poor. Didn't look like a janitor. Didn't even look uncertain. She looked present. I haven't worn this since Henry's funeral, I murmured. I didn't think I could. Angela came to stand beside me, her reflection joining mine. You wore it when you said goodbye to the man who loved you without condition. So if you can wear it for that, you can sure wear it to meet a few people who love condition more than character. I smiled, but it came with a lump in my throat. You always know how to talk me down from the ledge. She shrugged. That's what friends are for, reminding you what you already know when fear makes you forget. We moved to the kitchen, and she started boiling water like she always did when emotions came knocking. Tea fixes nothing, I said. Exactly, she said. That's why it's honest. It don't lie about what it can't do. The kettle hissed, and we stood in silence for a while. Outside, cicadas started their evening hymn, the soundtrack of southern summers that refused to end. You think Marcus is ashamed of me? I asked finally, not looking at her. Angela didn't flinch. I think Marcus is trying to fit into a world that told him to leave his mother at the door. And he's wrong for listening. Her words sat between us, heavy and holy. I don't want to embarrass him, I said quietly. You won't, she said. You couldn't if you tried. You walk into that room and breathe. That's all it takes to remind people what real looks like. I turned to face her. Angela, you ever been somewhere you knew you weren't wanted? She sipped her tea, eyes glinting. Honey, I've been black, loud, and alive for 62 years. I live in that room. But let me tell you something. Wanting me or not don't change the fact that I'm there. I laughed, though it came out more like a sigh. You make it sound easy. It ain't easy, she said. It's just necessary. Later, she pulled out her purse like a magician ready for her final trick. From it, she took a small velvet pouch and placed it in my palm. What's this? Earrings, she said. My mother's. I wore them when I met the governor for the first time. You wear them when you meet the fancy folk. They're not diamonds, but they fooled enough people. I opened the pouch. Inside were two delicate gold hoops, small, elegant, warm to the touch. Angela, I can't. You can, she said, cutting me off. You will. Don't argue with a woman holding boiling water. I smiled. You're something else. I'm your friend, she said. That's worse. We spent the next hour laughing, talking about everything and nothing, old gossip from church, Henry's obsession with dominoes, that time Marcus tried to iron his own shirt and nearly set the kitchen on fire. It was the kind of laughter that carried a secret ache, the kind that exists because you know life doesn't always give you many of these moments. As she was leaving, Angela turned at the door. One more thing, Evelyn. Yes. When you walk in there tomorrow night, remember, clothes don't make you worthy. They just make you comfortable. What makes you worthy is the life you lived wearing them. I stood there for a second, holding those words like they were scripture. I'll remember. She smiled, pointing at me. Good. Now stop doubting. God didn't spend 61 years on you for you to get shy in front of linen napkins. I laughed again, this time louder. Good night, Angela. Night, child. Try not to iron that dress again. Pride shows better when it's relaxed. After she left, the house fell quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't loneliness anymore, it was space. Space for breath, for thought, for grace. I carried the earrings to my vanity and set them next to the mirror. The burgundy dress still hung from the door, catching the soft lamplight like it knew something I didn't. I ran my hand over the fabric, and for the first time, I didn't see it as armor or disguise. It wasn't there to hide me. It was there to carry me. In the mirror, my reflection looked steady now. Not rich, not polished, but radiant in a way that didn't need permission. And as I turned off the light, Angela's words echoed in the dark. What makes you worthy is the life you lived wearing it. I whispered back to no one in particular. Then I suppose I'll shine whether they notice or not. Saturday afternoon arrived dressed in gold sunlight and nerves. By 5 o'clock, my house looked like it had been scrubbed for company. Even though I was the one leaving it. The air was thick with the scent of pressed fabric and lilac lotion. And my heart beat slow and heavy, like a hymn that couldn't decide whether to rise or stay silent. The burgundy dress hung on me just right, the earrings caught the light, and my shoes, modest little black heels, had been polished until they looked braver than I felt. Angela stood by the door, arms folded, tapping her foot as if time itself had to answer to her. You ready? She asked. I've been ready for 2 hours, I said, grabbing my small purse. Doesn't mean I've stopped being scared. Angela smiled. That's how you know it matters. She walked me out to the car, my old beige sedan that had seen better years but still started on the first try if you whispered to it kindly. I sat behind the wheel, feeling the hum beneath my hands, like the car knew where it was taking me even if my heart didn't. Angela leaned into the open window. Remember what I told you, she said. Which part? All of it. Her eyes softened. And call me if they get slick with you. I'll drive over there with holy oil and attitude. I laughed, but it didn't stick. Lord, don't let me need either. You won't, she said, and tapped the hood twice, a blessing, an unspoken promise. Then I pulled away. The city stretched out before me. Familiar streets turning into unfamiliar ones, old sidewalks giving way to new glass. Each traffic light felt like a small pause for courage. I passed through neighborhoods I knew by heart, where corner stores sold frozen pops for 50 cents and front porches still held stories from the night before. Kids played barefoot in driveways, their laughter loud enough to reach heaven. Then the scenery began to change. The cracked sidewalks disappeared. The paint on the houses got newer. The air itself felt cleaner. Or maybe just more expensive. I rolled down my window at a stoplight and felt the shift. No gospel music from open doors here. No barbecue smoke curling into the sky. Just silence and the low hum of engines that didn't belong to people who worried about gas prices. Atlanta had always been two cities pretending to share a name. And today, I was crossing from one into the other. As I drove, memories began stitching themselves together. The smell of Henry's work shirt after long shifts, the sound of Marcus laughing while eating cereal straight from the box, the feel of our old apartment where every wall echoed with our plans for a better life. Back then, the better life was never supposed to mean different people. It was supposed to mean the same love, just with fewer bills. Somewhere between Peachtree and Lenox Road, my stomach twisted. The buildings here stood taller, made of glass and pride. They caught the sunlight the way people here caught compliments, easily, and as if they were owed. I passed boutiques with names that didn't bother to explain themselves, restaurants where you needed a reservation just to afford the menu, and rows of trees trimmed to perfection, like even nature had to prove it belonged. When the GPS told me to turn left onto Carter Lane, I slowed. The road curved uphill, lined with houses that looked more like ambitions than homes. Wide porches, imported stone, lawns so green they felt edited. Marcus's world. Halfway up the hill, I stopped at a red light and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The same woman from the other side of the city looked back at me. Same eyes, same lines, same heartbeat. But for a moment, She looked small against the skyline. I adjusted my earrings, lifted my chin, and whispered, "You built him. Remember that." When the light turned green, I drove on. At the top of the hill, the houses got quieter, like money had taught them not to make noise. I found the address Marcus had sent, 2479, carved neatly into a stone mailbox beside a gate. The kind of gate that doesn't just keep people out, it decides who's allowed in. I pressed the intercom. A woman's voice, cool, professional, answered. "Yes, Evelyn Brooks," I said, my voice steady though my palms were damp. "I'm here for Marcus and Vanessa." The gate clicked open without another word. The sound was small but heavy, like an invitation you didn't ask for but accepted anyway. The driveway curved around a garden that looked hand-painted. Everything was trimmed to the same polite height. No wildflowers, no weeds, no mistakes. At the end of it stood the house, tall, white, and distant. Windows like mirrors. Doors like secrets. For a second, I couldn't bring myself to park. I just sat there, fingers still on the steering wheel, breathing in the quiet that didn't feel like peace. When Marcus was little, he used to tell me he'd buy me a big house one day. With stairs, he'd say, and a doorbell that plays music. And I used to smile and tell him, as long as it's got love inside, baby, I'll live anywhere. I wondered now if he remembered that promise, or if love was one of the things success had edited out. The front door opened before I even made it to the steps. Marcus stood there, handsome as ever in a crisp navy suit. His tie was the color of certainty, and his smile, though warm, didn't reach his eyes. "Ma," he said, walking toward me. "You look amazing." He sounded almost surprised. I smiled. "You sound relieved." He laughed softly, then hugged me. The kind of hug that says I love you. But also please don't stay too long. "You made good time," he said, stepping back. "Traffic wasn't bad?" "I took the long way," I said. Wanted to see how far it really was. He didn't catch the meaning, or maybe he did and didn't want to. Behind him, I saw the house's interior. Bright lights, glass chandeliers, people in clothes that looked like magazine pages come to life. Laughter floated out, polite and practiced. Vanessa appeared at the doorway, elegant in an ivory dress that looked like it had never known a wrinkle. Her smile was picture perfect. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, stepping forward, both hands out. "We're so happy you could come." I took her hands gently. "Thank you for inviting me," I said. The words came out smoother than I felt. Her perfume smelled expensive and distant, jasmine and something that didn't quite let you breathe. "Everyone's so excited to meet you," she said. "My mom's been talking about this dinner all week." "Is that right?" I asked, my smile holding. "Well, I'll try not to disappoint her." Marcus gave me a look, quick, warning, affectionate. I let it slide off me like perfume too strong for my skin. He led me inside, and I paused at the threshold. The house was beautiful, perfect really, but perfection has a way of feeling lonely. Every chair matched. Every photo frame was gold. Every candle burned without a drip. It smelled like lemon and silence. I glanced back out the window, down the hill, toward the city stretched far below. Somewhere out there were the streets that raised me, the walls that heard my laughter, the porches where my friends still sat barefoot, gossiping and alive. This world up here? It didn't know how to breathe without holding its stomach in. Marcus touched my arm lightly. "You okay, Ma?" I nodded, just thinking how big this house must feel when it's quiet. He smiled, missing the meaning again. "We're getting used to it." I looked at him, standing there in his pressed suit, in a world I had once prayed he'd reach. And I realized the truth that hurt and healed all at once. My boy had made it, but he'd built his new life so high up that the air no longer carried the scent of where he came from. The laughter from the dining room grew louder, and Marcus gestured toward it. "Come on, everyone's waiting." I took a deep breath, smoothed the fabric of my dress, and stepped inside. Every step felt like crossing a bridge I had built, one that connected everything I had been to everything he had become. And though the distance between those two worlds felt endless, I walked it anyway, steady, head high, one heartbeat at a time. Because I wasn't just visiting his new life. I was reminding him who gave him the map. The house stood like a photograph that had come to life, beautiful, but too still. as if the air itself had been told not to move too loudly. 3 stories of white stone and glass, with columns reaching toward a sky that looked polished just for the occasion. The front steps were wide and spotless, each one reflecting the fading sun, as if it had been trained to smile on cue. I parked at the curb, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle. Even the crickets seemed to know they weren't welcome here. The invitation had said casual elegance. But standing there, looking up at the house my son called home, I realized there wasn't a single thing casual about it. I reached for the door handle, but my hand hesitated. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to my own heartbeat, to the faint music drifting through the open windows, to the sound of laughter that came from people who had never waited for a paycheck to clear. Finally, I whispered to myself, "You've walked into harder rooms than this." And I meant it. I stepped out of the car. The driveway lights flickered on as I walked toward the steps, washing the pathway in gold. My heels clicked too loudly, echoing against the marble. Every sound felt like a question. What is she doing here? I reached the door just as it opened. Marcus stood there, smiling, polished like the floors inside. His suit was perfect, his tie pressed, his shoes shining like something expensive enough to carry pride. "Ma," he said and leaned forward to kiss my cheek. "You look amazing." "Thank you, baby," I said. "You do too." Behind him, the foyer opened like a confession. High ceilings, art that probably cost more than my car, a chandelier that looked like it had been borrowed from heaven. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the scent of white lilies and lemon polish hit me. Everything was soft, spotless, and deliberate. The rug beneath my feet was so thick it felt like walking on a secret. "Shoes on or off?" I asked quietly. Marcus blinked. "You can keep them on, Ma." "Just checking," I said, smiling. "Don't want to track any real life into this place." He chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. Vanessa appeared from the hallway like someone stepping out of a commercial. Her ivory dress shimmered against her brown skin. Her smile was practiced but not unkind. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, taking both my hands. "I'm so glad you could come." Her perfume filled the space between us, sweet and heavy. "Please," I said. "Just Evelyn." "Of course," she said, releasing my hands with a light pat, as if she was handling fine china. "You look lovely." "Thank you, dear. You too. This house." I glanced around. "It's something." She laughed softly. "Marcus worked so hard. I just tried to make it feel warm." It was warm. The kind of warmth that came from dim lights and expensive candles, not from people. As she led me toward the living room, I saw everything in perfect order. Furniture that looked untouched, family portraits framed in gold, a fireplace that burned purely for decoration. No magazines on the coffee table. No shoes kicked under the couch. No hint that anyone had ever laughed too hard in this space. There was a piano in the corner, glossy and silent. I remembered the old upright we'd had when Marcus was 10, the one we'd bought secondhand from a church auction. He'd played it for weeks before realizing the middle C stuck. He'd said, "It's fine, Mama. We'll just skip that note." I wondered when he'd stopped skipping notes and started hiding them instead. Voices floated from the dining room, polite, melodic, and careful. Vanessa guided me in, her hand light on my back like a tour guide. The table stretched longer than my kitchen. White linen, gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses. Everything glowed. Around it sat people dressed like advertisements. Women in satin, men in tailored suits, smiles gleaming. "This is my mother," Marcus said proudly, his hand resting on my shoulder. Every head turned at once. "Oh, Mrs. Brooks," said a woman at the far end, her lipstick the color of wine. "We've heard so much about you." I smiled, though my hands tightened around my purse. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," she said, and her laugh came out brittle. The man beside her raised his glass. "Your son's quite a talent, ma'am. You must be proud." "I am," I said. "Always have been." Vanessa's mother, Linda Carter, sat at the head of the table, her expression perfectly polite. Her hair was the kind that doesn't move unless permission's granted. She gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Please, Evelyn. Sit here." I thanked her and took my place, the room settling around me like a test. The dinner began with laughter, at first polite and then slowly louder, as wine softened voices. Conversation drifted between property values, weekend getaways, and the best new restaurants in Buckhead. I nodded when people looked my way, smiling when it was my turn to agree. "So, Evelyn," one of the men asked, "what do you do?" "I work at Briarwood Elementary," I said. "Oh, wonderful. Teaching?" I shook my head. "Custodial. I keep the school clean." A silence too brief to be polite followed. Then someone cleared their throat, and the talk moved on like nothing had been said. But I saw it in their faces, the soft flicker of pity, the tiny smile meant to cover discomfort. It wasn't new. I'd seen it before, back when I stood behind cafeteria counters, back when parents assumed I didn't speak English, back when people thought humility was the same as invisibility. I didn't need to defend myself. Truth doesn't need explaining. I turned to Marcus. "That chicken smells delicious." He smiled with relief, grateful for the distraction. "It's lemon rosemary. Vanessa picked the menu." I looked down the table at the food arranged like art. Everything perfect. Everything untouched. And suddenly, I missed the noise of my small kitchen. The sound of pots clanging, Angela's laughter, the smell of cornbread cooling on the windowsill. I missed meals that weren't performances. At some point, I excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. The hallway was lined with framed degrees, family photos, and one large portrait of Marcus and Vanessa in matching beige, both looking proud, untouchable, and utterly coordinated. I stopped in front of it and smiled. My boy looked happy, but not free. There's a kind of smile people wear when they've learned to hide their hunger. In the reflection of the glass, I caught my own face behind his. Two lives, one behind the other. The woman who raised him, and the man who forgot what that meant. When I returned to the table, dessert had been served. Tiny slices of cake, plated like secrets, too perfect to eat, too small to satisfy. Everyone was laughing again, this time a little too loud, as if they could sense the quiet I brought with me and wanted to drown it out. Vanessa leaned toward me. "Everything okay, Evelyn?" I smiled. "Yes, dear. Just taking it all in." Linda Carter raised her glass. "To family," she said. "And to new beginnings." The others echoed her, their glasses chiming like delicate bells. "To family," I repeated softly, raising my glass last. And for the first time that evening, I felt the sting of the truth. Sometimes family doesn't recognize you until you stop belonging to them. As the night wore on, the laughter turned faint, and my mind began to drift. I thought of Angela, probably sitting in her recliner right now, watching a rerun and muttering at the TV. I thought of my little house with its uneven floorboards and its faithful quiet. I thought of Henry's voice saying, "You can't climb a mountain without leaving footprints somewhere." And there, in that perfect house on the hill, surrounded by silk and silver and all the things that were supposed to mean enough, I realized that my footprints were the only real thing in the room. The rest was just polish. Dinner began with the sound of silverware brushing porcelain, the kind of polite clatter that tries too hard to sound natural. The table stretched between us like a stage, polished, candlelit, perfectly symmetrical. It was the sort of table that had never known fingerprints, never been used to roll dough or shell peas or hold elbows during a long story. Vanessa sat on Marcus's right, radiant and rehearsed, her smile steady enough to light a chandelier. Across from her sat her mother, Linda Carter, regal in a navy satin dress that shimmered every time she shifted. She had the calm, watchful face of a woman used to being the quietest authority in any room. I sat between two of Vanessa's friends, both beautiful, both polite, both looking at me the way one looks at a museum piece, respectfully curious, safely distant. Marcus carved the roast, his movements careful, controlled, like he was afraid of making a wrong sound. "Ma," he said, glancing down the table. "You want the end piece or middle?" "The end," I said. "More flavor lives there." He smiled. "Just like you always said." Vanessa laughed softly. "I've never heard that before. That's cute." "Good." She said it like a compliment, but it landed like something smaller. I smiled anyway. It's true. The end's got the story. The middle's just passing through. A few people chuckled, The kind of laughter that fills space but doesn't reach the eyes. The food was beautiful, I'll give them that. Perfect slices of roast beef, roasted vegetables arranged like they'd been measured with rulers, wine that smelled expensive enough to intimidate me. As the plates went around, the conversation turned to work, vacations, and things bought on sale that still cost more than my rent. So, Evelyn, one of the men asked, Marcus tells us you still live in Eastview. Isn't that near the old train yard? I nodded. A few blocks away. You can hear the freight trains at night if the wind's right. He smiled faintly. That must be noisy. Comforting, actually, I said. I like knowing something's still moving, even when everything else is still. The woman beside him smiled politely, but I could see it in her eyes. Pity dressed up as charm. The kind of look people give when they think your life is a tragedy you're too humble to notice. I took a slow sip of water and said nothing more. Vanessa's mother turned her attention toward me. Evelyn, this roast reminds me of the ones my housekeeper used to make when my husband was alive. Did you ever do much cooking, dear? Every day, I said, folding my napkin. Still do. She nodded as if she already knew the answer. Marcus must have been spoiled. Only a little, I said with a smile. He never went hungry, but he learned to wash his own plate. That got a few polite laughs. But Linda's lips didn't move. She lifted her glass instead, took a delicate sip, and looked at her daughter as though confirming something unspoken. Marcus tried to keep the conversation flowing, but I could see the tightness in his shoulders. Every time someone mentioned my job, he shifted, laughed too loud, or changed the subject. So, Mom, he said at one point, you still working nights? I am, I said. Somebody's got to make sure those hallways shine for the morning. Linda Carter smiled thinly. That's admirable. Hard work is a virtue, though I suppose at some point one deserves rest. Her tone carried the gentleness of a sermon, and the sting of a slap. I'll rest when the world stops being messy, I said evenly. Seems I'll be employed till kingdom come. Angela would have been proud of that one. The table fell quiet for a beat. Then Vanessa jumped in with a story about a recent charity gala. All sequins and speeches and donations. The moment passed like a wave, pretending it hadn't hit shore. Dessert came next, some kind of lemon tart, the kind that looks prettier than it tastes. I picked at it, mostly listening. The talk grew looser now, wine doing what wine does best, lowering voices and raising confessions. Vanessa's friend, a woman in a gold bracelet that jingled every time she spoke, leaned toward me. You must be so proud of Marcus. He's really made something of himself. Yes, I said. I'm proud every day. He told us how hard it was growing up, she continued, lowering her voice like she was giving me a compliment. It's really inspiring, you know how far he's come. Something cold settled in my chest. How far he's come. Like he'd been climbing out of a hole that I dug for him. I smiled anyway. He always had the kind of ambition you can't teach. I just made sure he had clean clothes and a full belly while he figured out the rest. Marcus glanced up at me, a flicker of something crossing his face, guilt, maybe, or gratitude he didn't know how to show. Mom worked hard, he said quickly. She's the reason I got through college. Vanessa touched his arm lightly, beaming. And now look at you. Everything came full circle. Full circle, I repeated softly. Funny how sometimes the circle looks more like a line. Her smile faltered, not sure whether it was a joke. Linda Carter placed her napkin on the table with the finality of someone making a point. Marcus, she said sweetly, we were just telling Vanessa earlier how proud you must be to bring your family together tonight. It's so important, you know, to show people where you come from. I could feel Marcus tense beside her words. They were polished, gracious, and cruel all at once. He forced a smile. Of course. Family's everything. She turned to me. You did a fine job raising him. You must be relieved to see him in good hands now. Relieved, I echoed. That's one word for it. Well, she said, folding her napkin again. He's in a different world now. But I'm sure that's what every mother wants. Different world. I let that phrase sit there, hot and heavy between us. Then I smiled, slow and careful. I don't mind the world he's in, Mrs. Carter. Long as he remembers who taught him how to stand in it. For a second, her eyes met mine, sharp, assessing, and maybe just a little surprised. Then Vanessa laughed lightly, cutting through the tension like sugar coating something sour. "You two are adorable," she said. Adorable. That word again. The nice way to tell someone you don't take them seriously. After dessert, the conversation moved to real estate, travel, art. Languages I didn't speak but understood well enough to know I wasn't expected to participate. So I smiled when they looked at me and listened when they didn't. Every so often, Marcus glanced at me, his expression flickering between pride and panic. He wanted me there, but not too loudly. Loved me, but only in a version that didn't embarrass him. And I couldn't even blame him. The world had taught him this silence, rewarded it, dressed it up in a suit, called it success. I stared down at my half-empty glass, the candlelight catching the reflection of my face. I looked calm, composed. But inside, something small and sharp was beginning to turn. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was the kind of ache that comes when you realize the thing you built, the thing you loved most, has started to build a wall between you and itself. The waiter came to clear plates, quiet and efficient. When he leaned close to take mine, I smiled at him, and he smiled back, an unspoken moment of recognition. He knew me, not personally, but in the way working people know each other, by the quiet endurance in their eyes. As he carried the dishes away, Linda began to talk about her late husband's company and how it had taught her the value of standards. I listened, nodding when expected, but my thoughts drifted elsewhere, to Angela's kitchen, to chipped mugs filled with laughter, to the sound of gospel music rising from the radio while collard greens simmered on the stove. That world wasn't elegant, but it was alive. It wasn't perfect, but it never asked me to apologize for existing in it. And as I sat there in the perfect house, at the perfect table, surrounded by people who mistook perfection for grace, I understood something simple and devastating. I didn't belong here. Not because I wasn't enough, but because I refused to become small enough to fit. Marcus stood, raising his glass. "To my fiancée," he said. "To the future." Everyone clinked their glasses together. I did too, smiling like a woman who didn't feel her hands trembling. "To the future," I said softly. But what I meant was, may it remember where it came from. The laughter had faded, leaving only the low hum of conversation and the soft scrape of forks against porcelain. From my seat near the end of the long dining table, I could see the glow of the candles flicker in the mirrored walls, multiplying light that somehow made the room feel darker. Vanessa excused herself first. "I'll go make sure dessert is ready," she said with that gentle, practiced smile. Her mother rose too, not out of necessity, but out of habit, following her daughter the way a shadow follows light. Marcus stayed behind, caught in conversation with one of his colleagues about real estate, profits, and emerging neighborhoods, which in my city was just another way of saying someplace where people like me used to live. I took a small sip of water and pretended to be interested in the floral centerpiece. When I noticed the hallway light flick on, I stood quietly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "Excuse me," I murmured to no one in particular. "Restroom." Nobody stopped me. Nobody even looked up. The hallway was cool and bright, too bright after the candlelit dining room. My heels clicked softly against the polished tile, echoing off marble and silence. Voices drifted from the kitchen. At first, I didn't mean to listen. I just needed a moment. A breath away from all the careful smiles and the weight of silverware I couldn't afford. But then I heard my name. "I told Marcus it was necessary," Vanessa was saying, her tone low but sharp. "It's better she came even if it's awkward." My steps froze mid-stride. Her mother's voice followed, calm and measured, the sound of judgment dressed in silk. "Awkward? It's essential. Appearances matter, Vanessa. If people see that he's close to his mother, it softens the edges, humanizes him." "Still," Vanessa sighed. "I wish she'd at least worn something less." A pause. "Less obvious." Her mother chuckled lightly. "You mean less ordinary?" "Yes. I didn't want anyone thinking we're." She stopped. I could hear the smile in her voice when she said it. Uneven. The words hit like a slap. Not loud, not dramatic, but cold and precise. Uneven. As if love itself were a number to be balanced. I stood there in that perfect hallway, every inch of me frozen. For a moment, I didn't even breathe. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like thunder. Linda Carter continued, her voice dripping with the calm confidence of someone who had never had to apologize for cruelty. Don't look so bothered, dear. Every family has reminders. You just have to make sure they know their place. Vanessa's reply was quieter. I know. I just wish Marcus didn't feel so guilty about it. Guilt, Linda said, is a small price for progress. He'll understand eventually. We raised him to move forward, not backward. Something clattered. Maybe a spoon, maybe my heart, but neither of them noticed. I stepped back slowly, the way one does when leaving a church after realizing the sermon isn't meant for you. I didn't cry. Not then. I just walked into the nearest guest bathroom and shut the door quietly behind me. The mirror above the sink caught me in its light, the same woman from earlier, but different somehow. The smile she'd been holding for hours had finally cracked. I pressed a hand against the counter to steady myself. Uneven, I whispered, testing the word on my tongue. It tasted like iron and memory. My reflection didn't flinch. She just stared back at me, tired, beautiful, and far too familiar with this kind of hurt. I remembered a night long ago, when Marcus was 12. He'd come home from a classmate's birthday party and asked me why the other kids' mothers didn't smell like bleach. I'd told him, because some folks have jobs that don't wash off. That night, he'd hugged me anyway, his little arms smelling like frosting and innocence. But somewhere between that boy and the man in the dining room, the world had scrubbed something off him. Outside the door, I could hear footsteps. The voices drew closer again. Make sure she doesn't feel left out, Vanessa said. Marcus is already sensitive about it. If he sees her upset, it'll just create more drama. Don't worry, her mother replied. Women like her know how to behave. They're used to being grateful just to be invited. That did it. Something in me, something quiet and heavy and ancestral, began to rise. The kind of anger that doesn't scream. The kind that remembers. I straightened, lifted my chin, and smoothed my dress as if preparing for battle. In the mirror, my face looked calm again, but my eyes were sharper now. Two small fires refusing to dim. When I returned to the dining room, the air felt colder, even though nothing had changed. Vanessa smiled when she saw me. Everything okay, Evelyn? Oh yes, I said. Just needed a moment. Her mother nodded approvingly. Long dinners can be exhausting. Yes, I said, looking her square in the eye. Especially when you realize what they're really for. Marcus looked up from his seat, confused, but I smiled before he could ask. The room fell quiet for half a second. Then the chatter picked back up, as if the silence had been a glitch they needed to correct. I took my seat again, folded my napkin neatly in my lap, and reached for my water glass. My hands were steady now. All around me, people laughed, clinked glasses, and complimented the wine. But the sound came from far away, because while they were celebrating their reflection of perfection, I had just seen its cracks. The dinner, the invitation, the compliments, all of it was a performance. And I was the prop. They hadn't invited me to honor me. They'd invited me to prove that they were kind enough to tolerate me. I didn't touch my dessert. Didn't say another word. Instead, I sat still and watched, really watched, the people at that table. Every laugh, every polite smile, every careful gesture was suddenly transparent. I saw the hunger behind it. The fear. The desperate need to belong to something that had already forgotten how to feel. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt pity. Because they had everything, chandeliers, crystal, fine china, and still had to borrow love to fill the space between them. Vanessa's laughter rang out again, high and hollow. Marcus squeezed her hand, looking proud, grateful, blind. I studied his face, the man I raised with prayers and overtime, and whispered under my breath, so quietly no one could hear. You don't know it yet, baby, but tonight you're going to see what grace really looks like. Then I lifted my glass, smiled, and took a slow, steady sip, not because I was celebrating, but because I'd just decided how the night would end. It happened so fast that, at first, no one even realized what had occurred. 1 second, the dinner was humming along, laughter soft and shallow like background music, and the next, there was a sharp clink of glass, the gasp of surprise, and a bloom of red spreading across the perfect white tablecloth. The sound came from my side of the table. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the glass of Merlot that had slipped from my fingers, tilting in slow motion before crashing into the gleaming silver cutlery. The wine ran wild, crawling across the linen, staining it like an accusation. "Oh my God!" Vanessa exclaimed, her voice higher than usual. It's okay, don't worry." She reached for a napkin, but not before glancing at her mother. The kind of glance people share when something inconvenient happens in public. The kind that says, "Control this before anyone sees too much." Marcus shot up, grabbing napkins too quickly, his movements stiff. "It's fine, Mom, it's fine. Just an accident." "I know, baby," I said softly, reaching to help. "I've cleaned up worse messes in my life." That earned a few polite laughs, but the sound was uneasy. Linda Carter didn't laugh. She dabbed her lips delicately with her napkin, eyes fixed on the spreading stain. "Red wine," she murmured, "always unforgiving." Her tone was calm, but her expression was pure disapproval, as if the spill wasn't wine but evidence. A waiter appeared almost instantly, carrying a towel and a small bottle of seltzer, moving with quiet urgency. I tried to wave him off. "Please let me." But Linda raised a manicured hand. No, Vir. He's got it. You'll only make it worse." The words weren't cruel by definition, but something in the way she said dear made my spine stiffen. Marcus placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Mom, really it's fine." The waiter blotted at the tablecloth, whispering, "No problem, ma'am," though his eyes flicked to mine in something close to solidarity. I caught the look and nodded. We both knew that kind of mess wasn't the real issue. The smell of wine lingered, earthy, sharp, too alive for a room that preferred everything sterile and contained. Conversation stuttered, then resumed, thinner than before. Vanessa forced a laugh. "Well, I guess every family dinner needs at least one story to tell." Her friend in gold bracelets chimed in. "It's good luck, actually. My aunt says a spill at the table means someone's about to speak their truth." A hush fell, quick and uneasy. Vanessa smiled too tightly. "Well, let's hope the truth tonight is that this tablecloth can be dry cleaned." Marcus chuckled weakly, and everyone followed. But the laughter didn't land. The air was heavier now, not from the wine, but from what it represented. Something had cracked, and no amount of napkins could patch it back together. I looked at the stain again. Deep red spreading like roots through fabric, creeping toward the edges. It was beautiful, in a way. Honest. It didn't pretend to belong there. It didn't hide its color or shape. And for the first time all evening, I felt something I hadn't since walking into that house, calm. Because what they feared most had finally happened. Imperfection had arrived, and it had come wearing my fingerprints. Linda leaned toward Vanessa, voice low but not low enough. "I told you this table was too small for 10 people. Accidents happen when things are too cramped." Vanessa's smile faltered. "It's fine, Mother." Marcus caught my eye, the faintest plea written across his face. "Don't make it worse." But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just observant. "Accidents happen everywhere," I said, folding my napkin. "Doesn't matter how big the table is. Sometimes it's the people sitting at it who make the space feel small." The room froze. Vanessa blinked. "Oh, of course you're right." She let out a nervous laugh, trying to rescue the tone. "We're all just a little clumsy tonight." Marcus smiled too quickly. "Mom's got a point though. Things don't need to be perfect to be nice." Linda offered a faint, frosty smile. "That's its comforting perspective." "It's experience," I said. "You pick it up when you've had to clean up after other people's mistakes." There it was. The truth, small, sharp, and shining like broken glass. For a moment no one breathed. The music playing softly in the background seemed to grow louder, filling the silence left by politeness that had finally run out of room. I took a sip of water, calm and steady. My hands didn't shake. It wasn't rebellion. It was relief. Because the truth of that room, the thing none of them would ever admit, was that perfection exhausts itself trying to stay whole. But authenticity, it stains everything it touches. And tonight, authenticity had spilled all over their perfect white tablecloth. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom," he said quietly, Why don't we step outside for a second? Why? I asked, smiling. I'm fine right here. His eyes softened, a flicker of the boy I used to know breaking through the man who'd learned to survive on silence. But before he could answer, Linda said, Yes, Marcus, that's a good idea. Maybe a bit of air will help. Air's fine where I'm sitting, I said gently. Besides, I think the worst of it's already out in the open. She smiled without warmth. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Of course you do, I replied. But I don't hold it against you. Some people learn how to clean. Others only learn how to hide the stains. I stood, slowly, deliberately. The chair made a soft scraping sound against the floor. A noise small enough to be polite, but sharp enough to command attention. The waiter froze mid-step. Marcus looked down. Vanessa's breath caught. I think, I said softly. I've been at this table long enough. Mom, please. Marcus started, but I touched his hand lightly. It's all right, baby. You finish your dinner. You've worked too hard to go hungry now. I reached for my coat from the back of the chair, sliding it on with calm precision. No one moved. As I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back at the table. The candles flickered against the stain, the red now drying darker, almost black. Everyone was pretending not to see it. But it was there. Permanent. Undeniable. The only honest thing left in that perfect room. I turned to Linda and said quietly, You were right about one thing. Red wine is unforgiving. Then I smiled, not the small, polite kind, but the one that comes from finally remembering who you are. And with that, I walked out. Behind me, the silence stretched long and trembling. The sound of truth settling into fine linen, refusing to wash away. Silence is an odd thing. It doesn't arrive all at once. It grows, spreading like spilled ink across a page until every word drowns in it. That's what happened when I walked out of the dining room. The silence followed me like a shadow, clinging to my heels. I didn't go far, just into the foyer, where the smell of lemon polish was still sharp in the air. I stood there for a moment, coat half on, purse hanging from my elbow, listening to the muffled chaos I'd left behind. Through the open archway, I could see them, frozen like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Vanessa was staring at the stain. Linda Carter was staring at me. Marcus was staring at the space between us, trying to hold both worlds in his hands. It would have been easy to just walk out. Lord knows I wanted to. But there's a kind of dignity that doesn't let you leave too soon. The kind that says, You started this quietly, you'll end it the same way. So I turned around slowly and stepped back toward the table. No one spoke as I re-entered the room. Even the air seemed afraid to move. The music had stopped, someone must have turned it off, and the clink of silverware was gone. Only the candles flickered, their flames leaning toward me as if waiting. Marcus stood halfway, uncertain. Mom. Sit down, I said softly. Please. He obeyed. His eyes were wide, his voice small. It broke something inside me, seeing the boy he used to be flash through the man he'd become. I rested my hand on the back of my chair, but didn't sit. I suppose I made quite the scene, I said, forcing a small smile. That wasn't my intention. Vanessa spoke first, her voice trembling just slightly. It's okay, really. It was just an accident. I looked at her, really looked, and realized how young she was beneath all that polish. Her eyes betrayed her. She wasn't cruel. She was scared. Scared of imperfection. Scared that loving Marcus meant inheriting his past. Accidents, I said quietly, usually show you what's been hiding under the surface. Linda straightened in her chair. Evelyn, she said, calm but firm. We don't have to turn this into something dramatic. Things got emotional, that's all. Emotional, I repeated. That's one word for it. I walked around the table, slow, steady, fingers brushing the linen where the wine had dried dark. I've spent my whole life cleaning up other people's messes. Kitchens, classrooms, hallways. You name it. And you learn something doing that kind of work, about people. I stopped at the end of the table, where Marcus Saturday. You learn who notices the mess, and who pretends it's not there. No one moved. I heard what was said in the kitchen. I continued. And don't worry, I'm not mad. I've heard worse. But it still amazes me how quickly good manners can turn into masks. Vanessa's face went pale. Evelyn, I'm not finished, baby, I said gently, raising a hand. Let me say this right. I looked around the table, at the shining plates, the half-eaten desserts, the people shifting in their chairs, uncomfortable in a way no expensive seat could fix. I raised my son on less than what you spent on that chandelier, I said. I did it with dignity, and I never once apologized for being where I came from. Not until tonight, when I realized my own child thinks he has to hide me to fit in. Marcus flinched, his lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. I'm not angry at you, Marcus, I said softly. You wanted more for yourself. Every mother prays for that. But wanting more shouldn't mean wanting less of where you came from. His eyes shimmered, and for a second the room blurred. The man I saw now wasn't the one in the tailored suit. It was the boy who used to run home with scraped knees and stories, who used to kiss my cheek before bedtime and whisper, "One day I'll buy you a big house, Mama." And here we were, in that house. Only it didn't feel like mine. Linda cleared her throat. Evelyn, I think. Mrs. Carter, I said, turning to her. I know what you think. You think class is something you can buy, something you can host at your table. But class isn't the size of your home, or the fabric on your dress. It's how you treat the people who have less than you. Her eyes hardened, but she didn't speak. I've seen real grace in women who never owned a matching set of dishes, I continued. And I've seen cruelty served on silver trays. The words hung heavy. No one reached for their glasses. No one even blinked. I turned to Vanessa then, softer now. You'll learn this, baby, if you're lucky. All the money in the world won't make a person kind. And the way a man treats his mother is the clearest glimpse you'll ever get of the husband he'll be. Vanessa's eyes filled, though she tried to hide it. Linda's lips tightened, the kind of disapproval that has nowhere left to go. Marcus rose halfway again. Mom, please, you're embarrassing yourself. I smiled. No, son. I'm saving myself. The words surprised even me. They came out calm, certain, the way truth always sounds when it's ready. For a moment, everything stood still. Then I pulled out my chair and finally sat, not as a guest, not as an apology, but as a woman reclaiming her place at her own table. I'm not leaving until I finish what I came here to do, I said, folding my hands. To eat dinner with my son. No one dared speak. So I picked up my fork, cut a piece of cold chicken and took a slow bite. The sound of my chewing, quiet, deliberate, filled the room like thunder. And then something remarkable happened. Marcus sat too. He didn't say anything, didn't look up, just followed my lead, his hands trembling as he picked up his fork. One by one, the others followed, because silence has a way of demanding obedience. We ate. Together. No laughter. No chatter. Just the sound of truth settling in. When I finally pushed my plate aside, I looked up at my son and said, "Now we can all breathe again." Vanessa blinked hard, Linda pursed her lips, and Marcus, my boy, looked like he wanted to both cry and thank me in the same breath. I rose slowly, my dignity intact, the silence following me like a crown. Because that night, in that grand house on the hill, surrounded by people who thought elegance was the same as worth, I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stay seated. The air in that dining room had gone still again, but this time the silence wasn't awkward. It was electric. It had weight now, a pulse. You could almost hear it breathing. The candles flickered against the wine stain that cut across the white linen like an open wound. And in that broken beauty, I found my voice. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require volume. They carry their own echo. I rested both hands on the table, palms flat, the way my mother used to when she was about to deliver a blessing or a warning. Sometimes both. I've spent most of my life in rooms like this, I began quietly. Not this big, not this shiny, but rooms where people pretend to be smaller than they are, just to make others comfortable. Rooms where you have to swallow your pride to keep the peace. Rooms where kindness is offered like it's charity, not respect. Every eye was on me. I cleaned those rooms, served in them, listened in them. And what I learned is that no matter how fancy the furniture, people don't change much. They just get better at hiding who they are. Vanessa's hand trembled slightly on her wine glass. Marcus stared at the plate in front of him, as if it could save him. I looked at my son and softened my tone. When you were little, Marcus, we didn't have much. Some days we had more hope than food. But we had truth. I told you if you ever wanted to be a man of worth, start with that, truth. Because money can't buy it, and lies can't hold it. He finally looked up, eyes glassy. Mama, I didn't. I know, baby, I said. You didn't mean for this to happen. You just forgot that where you come from is not something you outgrow. It's something you honor. Linda Carter straightened her posture, but I didn't let her interrupt. I know I'm not what this world calls refined, I continued. But I've met plenty of refined people who couldn't find grace with a map. You all talk about image, appearances, elegance. But let me tell you something. Elegance is what you have left when the money's gone and no one's looking. It's how you treat the waiter, the janitor, the woman who spills her wine. I turned my gaze to Linda, calm and steady. You thought I didn't hear you earlier, when you said I was here to make Marcus look good, to soften his edges. But that's not what mothers are for. We don't exist to decorate our children's success. We built the ground they stand on. Her eyes flickered. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I looked around the table, meeting each face in turn. I see a lot of fine things here tonight. The food, the house, the people. Everything polished until it shines. But there's a kind of hunger that can't be fed by silver spoons. It's the hunger to be seen as enough. I took a slow breath. And I want you all to hear this clearly. I am enough. Always have been. Marcus's voice broke the stillness, low and trembling. Mama, please don't go. I smiled gently. I'm not going anywhere. Not until I say what's been sitting on my chest for too many years. I turned to Vanessa then. The young woman who'd built her life out of control, perfection, and fear of judgment. You love my son. I can tell that much. But don't love him for who he becomes when he's around people like you. Love him for who he was when he had nothing to hide. The man who still called me after every job interview. Who laughed over takeout. Who wasn't afraid of being ordinary. Vanessa swallowed hard. Her mascara glistening under the candlelight. I do love him, she whispered. I believe you, I said. But don't let that love turn into shame. Because shame has a way of burning down the very people who carried you through the fire. For a moment no one spoke. I could feel the weight of every word settle into the walls. Then I smiled faintly, remembering my late husband, Henry, and his voice from long ago. Speak when it matters, Eve, he used to say. Not to be heard, but to be understood. So I continued, slower now, deliberate. When Henry passed, Marcus was 17. I worked double shifts to pay for his tuition, skipped meals so he could have books, ironed his shirts before sunrise. I did all that because I believed that one day he'd walk into rooms like this, and bring me with him. Not to impress anyone, just because love shouldn't be ashamed of where it started. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. I thought tonight would be that moment. I thought I'd see pride in my son's eyes when he introduced me. Instead, I saw fear. The kind of fear that says, what if they see her the way I used to? Marcus dropped his gaze, tears beginning to gather. I'm sorry, he whispered. I reached across the table, touching his hand. No, baby. I'm the one who's sorry, for letting you think I ever needed to be someone else to deserve your love. Linda shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn, none of this was meant to offend you. I smiled softly. I know that. But offense isn't always about intent. Sometimes it's about blindness. I stood then, slow and steady, every movement deliberate. You've all built lives that look beautiful from the outside. But beauty without truth is like wine without flavor. It looks rich, but it doesn't satisfy. I took my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table beside my empty plate. Tonight, I said. I learned that sometimes love has to speak loud enough to wake its own child. And sometimes the only way to teach grace is to show it. I turned to Marcus one last time. You don't need to prove anything to these people, or to me. Just remember that success means nothing if you have to hide your heart to keep it. He nodded, silent tears tracing down his face. Vanessa reached for his hand. Then I exhaled, long, slow, freeing. Now, I said quietly, glancing at the table one last time. You all enjoy your dessert. I've had mine. And as I walked away, the room didn't erupt in protest. No one called after me. The only sound was the soft flicker of candles and the echo of truth filling every corner. Behind me, Marcus's voice finally broke the silence. "Mama," he said, standing, voice shaking. "You don't have to go." I turned, smiling gently. "Oh, I'm not leaving because I have to, baby. I'm leaving because I finally can." And then I did. With my head high, my heart steady, and my dignity unshaken. Because sometimes the most powerful speech a woman can give is the one that ends in peace, not applause. The night air hit me like truth, cool, open, and unashamed. It smelled of wet grass and rain that hadn't fallen yet, heavy with something waiting to break. Behind me, the glow of the house spilled onto the porch steps, soft and golden, like a world that wanted me to turn back. I didn't. I stood at the edge of the driveway, pulling my shawl tighter around my shoulders. The silence of the neighborhood pressed in. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of streetlights and the faint echo of laughter that didn't belong to me. For a long moment, I let myself breathe. In, out, slow. The kind of breathing you forget to do when you've been holding yourself upright for too long. Then I heard the door creak open. "Mom." Marcus's voice. It cracked the air like the first drop of rain before a storm. He stepped out onto the porch, hesitating like a boy afraid to approach the teacher he disappointed. His tie was loose now, his perfect evening undone. "Wait," he said softly. "Please." I turned slowly. "I'm not running, Marcus." He stopped 2 steps below me, his face lit by the porch light. There were tears there. He tried to blink them away, but they clung stubbornly, shining in the yellow glow. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out too fast, almost tripping over each other. "For everything. For tonight. For letting me treat you like you don't belong." "Baby," I said gently, "you didn't let them do anything I didn't already survive once before." He shook his head. "No, that's not. You shouldn't have had to. I heard you in there. I heard every word." I smiled faintly. Then maybe it was worth spilling the wine after all. He let out a shaky laugh, wiped his cheek with the back of his hand. "You have no idea how much I hate myself right now." "Oh, don't do that," I said softly. "The world does enough hating for all of us. No sense joining in." His voice cracked. "I wanted to make you proud. I thought if I worked hard, made money, moved up, I could give you something back. Something better." "You did," I said. He frowned. "How?" "I made you feel small." I stepped closer, resting my hand against his cheek. "You gave me what every mother hopes for, proof that her love didn't end in vain. You built a life. You just forgot the foundation it stood on." He closed his eyes, leaning into my palm like he used to when he was little. "I was ashamed," he whispered, "of what we came from." I sighed. "No, baby. You weren't ashamed of what we came from. You were afraid they would be. There's a difference." He looked up, the weight of guilt making him older than his years. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Good thing I'm not handing it out like dessert," I said softly. "Forgiveness isn't something people earn, Marcus. It's something you give because carrying anger gets too heavy." His shoulders trembled. "Then why are you so calm?" "Because I've been here before," I said. "Not on this porch, not in that house, but in moments like this. With your father. With life. With myself. The first time someone makes you feel small, it breaks you. The second time, it teaches you where not to kneel." He swallowed hard. "And now I stand," I said. "And I forgive." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with things too big for words: regret, love, exhaustion, peace. Marcus wiped his face, his voice breaking again. "What do I even do now?" I smiled gently. "Start by walking me to my car." He managed a weak laugh. "At least that, I can do." We walked together down the path, our footsteps echoing softly on the stone. The lights from the house spilled behind us, but out here the sky was dark and honest. He opened the car door for me, just like his daddy used to. Small gestures, old habits. The kind that live in your bones no matter how far you go. I turned to him before getting in. "Marcus," I said, "you know what I realized tonight?" He shook his head. "That house up there, all the people in it, they think grace is something that happens in church on Sunday." "But grace," I said, is standing in the dirt and still choosing to lift someone else up. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening again. You're still lifting me even now. That's what mothers do, I said. Even when their arms get tired. He leaned against the door, his voice barely above a whisper. Can I come by tomorrow? Just to talk? I'll put the kettle on, I said. But next time, bring your fiancée. I think she could use a little of what we forgot to teach you. He smiled, embarrassed. You're impossible. Thank God for that, I said with a wink. He laughed through his tears, and for the first time that night, it sounded real. Not polite, not performative, just human. As I started the car, he stepped back onto the curb, watching me. The porch light framed him, my boy, grown but still mine. I rolled down the window. Marcus. Yeah. You can't build a future if you're ashamed of your past. It's like planting flowers in cement. He nodded slowly. I'll remember that. Good, I said. Because that's the last lesson I'm giving for free. We both laughed then, soft, shared, and full of everything we hadn't said. When I drove off, I glanced in the mirror one last time. He was still standing there on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, face lifted to the night sky. And for a second, I could almost see Henry standing beside him, smiling that quiet, proud smile that said, You did good, Eve. You did good. So I whispered it back, just for the stars to hear. I know. And as the road opened before me, I felt something lift, not just forgiveness, but release. Because some love stories aren't between two lovers. Some are between a mother and the man her boy is finally becoming. Morning came slow, like the world was trying not to wake me too suddenly. The light slipped through the thin curtains of my little living room, soft, golden kind. For once, it didn't accuse. It just was. I sat on the couch still wearing the dress from last night. Shoes off, hair pinned half loose. My coat hung over the armrest, one sleeve sliding toward the floor like it was too tired to hold on. I felt the same way. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the faint creak of the ceiling fan that had outlived 3 landlords. It wasn't much, this place, but it was mine. Every wall had a story. Every chip of paint knew my name. I leaned back and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My throat was sore, not from shouting, but from finally saying everything I'd kept swallowed for years. The silence here was different from the silence in that house on the hill. Theirs was polished, heavy, rehearsed. Mine was gentle, the kind that heals. A soft knock came at the door. Only one person in the world knocked like that. 2 short taps, a pause, then one long. Come in, Angela, I said before she even spoke. The door creaked open, and there she was, in her pink housecoat, slippers, and a headscarf tied crooked, carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a paper bag that smelled like fresh biscuits. Morning sunshine, she said with that grin that could resurrect the dead. You look like you wrestled with God and maybe won. I smiled, voice rough. I think he let me win out of mercy. She plopped herself down beside me, setting the coffee on the table. Well, whatever you did, it's all over town. Mrs. Green at the corner store said she heard from her cousin's sister's neighbor that you told off the whole Carter clan and walked out like a queen. I chuckled weakly. News travels faster than sin in this neighborhood. Angela waved her hand. Honey, around here truth got wings. Now tell me, did you at least look good doing it? I laughed then, real and loud. Apparently good enough to stain a $400 tablecloth. Praise the Lord, she said, leaning back. About time somebody brought color into those people's lives. We sat there in companionable silence for a while, sipping coffee. The steam fogged my glasses. Angela's presence filled the room in a way that didn't demand attention. It just existed, warm and certain, like morning sun on tired skin. Did Marcus call? She asked eventually. I nodded. Came by after I left. We talked. He's sorry. Angela hummed. He's a good boy. Just lost his compass for a minute. The world does that to our children sometimes. Makes them forget who built the road they're walking on. I know, I said quietly. He's trying. She nudged my arm. And you? I exhaled, staring at the coffee swirling in my cup. I'm lighter. Not happy yet, but lighter. Like I finally unpacked a suitcase I've been carrying for 20 years. Angela nodded. Forgiveness'll do that. People think it's a gift to someone else, but baby, it's really the key that opens your cage. Her words landed deep. I felt them settle in the space between my ribs where last night's ache had lived. I glanced around my living room, the chipped table, the photo of Henry smiling from the wall, the old clock that ticked just a little too loud. For the first time in a long while, it all looked beautiful again. Funny thing, I said softly. After that dinner, I came home expecting to feel empty. But all I feel is peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need proof. Angela smiled, eyes kind and knowing. That's 'cause peace don't live in mansions, baby. It lives where truth does. She reached into the paper bag and handed me a biscuit. Eat something before your body forgets you won. I took it, warm and buttery, split it open, and watched the steam rise. You ever notice, I said, how the simplest things taste better after you stop pretending? She grinned. Girl, that's why I ain't pretended a day in my life. We laughed again, easy, genuine, without the effort of politeness. It was the kind of laughter that carried healing inside it. After a while, Angela stood, stretching her back. All right, Queen Evelyn, I'm gonna let you rest. But don't you dare spend this day thinking about what they said. Spend it remembering what you said. I will, I promised. At the door, she turned back. You know, I always said your strength was quiet. But last night? That was thunder and silk. I smiled, tears threatening but gentle this time. Thank you, Angela. She winked. You thank the Lord. I just bring the biscuits. And with that, she was gone, leaving behind the scent of coffee, butter, and sisterhood. I sat there for a long while after she left. The clock ticked steady on the wall. I thought about Marcus, his face in the porch light, the way his voice trembled when he said Mama. I thought about Henry too, and the life we'd built from scraps and prayers. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I said it out loud, not as a question, not as a hope, but as a truth finally earned. I did good. The sunlight touched my hands like an answer, and somewhere deep inside I knew forgiveness had finally finished its work. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the morning hold me. No guilt, no shame, no pretending. Just me, my coffee, and the sound of peace finding its way home. It had been 3 weeks since that night on the hill. 3 quiet, gentle weeks filled with ordinary grace. Mornings with coffee and gospel humming low. Afternoons sweeping the porch. Evenings sitting by the window with the light fading across the street. The world hadn't changed, but I had. There was no bitterness left in me. Only a calm that came from saying everything I'd ever been too polite to say. The air in my house felt lighter now. Every creak and hum seemed to settle into peace, like the walls themselves had exhaled. Then, one Saturday morning, just as I was watering the little fern that never quite grew right, I heard a knock. Soft, careful, familiar. When I opened the door, there he was. Marcus. He looked smaller somehow, standing on my porch in jeans and a plain sweatshirt. No suit, no watch, no armor. His eyes were tired, not from work, but from carrying the kind of guilt that doesn't let a man rest. Hey, Ma, he said quietly. Hey, baby. We stood there for a second, neither of us sure who should move first. Then I opened the screen door wider. Well, don't just stand there looking pitiful. Come on in. He smiled, a real one this time, and stepped inside. The house seemed to greet him too. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air, and the soft jazz from the radio filled the silence that could have been awkward but wasn't. He looked around like he was seeing the place for the first time. I forgot how warm it feels in here. That's 'cause you can't fake warmth, I said. It lives where truth does. He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. You sound like Miss Angela. Good, I said. She usually saves me from saying it twice. We both chuckled, and for the first time in a long time, laughter didn't feel like pretending. I poured him a cup of coffee, same mug he used when he was in high school. The one with a crack down the handle but still holding strong. He turned it over in his hands before taking a sip. You still got this thing? Of course, I said. It ain't perfect, but it does the job. He smiled faintly, just like its owner. Careful, I said, pointing a finger. Flattery won't get you a biscuit unless you mean it. He laughed softly, but the sound caught in his throat. Then he looked up at me, serious now. I owe you more than an apology, Ma. I said nothing, just waited. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low. I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night. About you. About me. About the man I thought I was trying to be. I let him speak. I'd learned long ago that silence is sometimes the kindest permission you can give. I kept chasing this idea of success, he said, staring into his coffee. A bigger house, nicer clothes, better people. I thought if I looked like I belonged, maybe I'd stop feeling like that scared kid from Eastview. He paused, swallowed hard. But the truth is, I lost something trying to fit in. I lost you. My eyes softened, but I didn't move. I told myself I was protecting you from judgment, he continued. But really, I was protecting myself from shame. And I hate that it took you walking out that door for me to see it. His voice cracked then, barely holding steady. I'm sorry, Ma. Not for one night, for all the little times before it, when I should have been proud to stand beside you and wasn't. I reached out and laid my hand over his. You done talking? He nodded, eyes glistening. Good, I said, leaning back. 'Cause now it's my turn. He smiled through the tears. Okay. Son, I began, slow and steady. You don't owe me perfection. You never did. I didn't raise you to impress anyone. I raised you to remember who you are when the world tries to make you forget. And you did forget, but that's all right. Most of us have to get lost once before we realize home ain't a place. It's a person. He looked down, trying to hide the tears now running freely. I reached over, touched his chin, and lifted his face. And I'm right here. Same as always. You don't have to earn your way back. He took a shaky breath. You're too good to me. Don't mistake grace for weakness, I said gently. Forgiveness ain't easy. It costs something. But love's never cheap, and you're worth the price. We sat in quiet after that, not the heavy kind, but the peaceful kind that comes after a storm. Then, almost shyly, Marcus said, Vanessa wanted to come today. She's waiting in the car. I arched an eyebrow. Oh, she's brave enough to face me now. He chuckled nervously. She's scared you'll turn her into a sermon. I smiled. Well, maybe she needs one. Go get her. He hesitated. You sure? I'm sure. If she's gonna love my son, she's gotta learn what she's marrying into, humility and home cooking. He laughed, wiping his face with his sleeve before heading out. A few minutes later, Vanessa appeared in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Her hands trembled just slightly. Mrs. Brooks, she said quietly. Evelyn, I corrected. We don't use titles in this house. She nodded, stepping inside. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For that night. For how I acted. You didn't deserve that. I studied her for a moment. The polish was still there, but the edges were softer now. The armor had cracked, and through it, I saw a real woman. Thank you, Vanessa, I said. Apology accepted. But next time, don't bring flowers when what you owe someone is time. She blinked, then smiled faintly. I can do that. Good, I said. Now sit. Both of you. I made peach cobbler. They laughed, both of them, genuinely this time, and sat at my small kitchen table, knees nearly touching because there wasn't room to hide. I served them each a plate, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. This, I said, placing the dish in front of Marcus, is how you heal a family. Not with fancy words or money, with food, forgiveness, and the truth still warm. He smiled. Tastes like home. That's 'cause it is, I said. When they left later that afternoon, the sun was low, gold spilling across the porch like honey. Marcus hugged me tight, longer than he had in years. I love you, Mama, he said into my shoulder. I know, I whispered back. Now go love that woman the way I loved you, without shame. He nodded, eyes wet, and led Vanessa down the steps. She turned back once, smiled, and waved. When the car disappeared down the street, I stood there a long time, the wind tugging gently at my shawl. Inside, the house was quiet again, but it wasn't lonely. It felt full. On the table sat 3 empty plates, crumbs of cobbler, and 2 half-drunk cups of coffee. Evidence of something mended. I looked at them and smiled. Love costs, I said softly to no one in particular. But it's worth every payment. Then I turned off the lights, let the evening settle in, and whispered one last prayer. Not for strength this time, but for gratitude. Because forgiveness had brought my son home. And that was the richest thing I'd ever own.